Halterman-Dess, and I'm the Librarianics Coordinator at the University of Iowa Libraries, which means that I supervise our offsite storage facility. Today on Snacks from the Stacks, I'll be making Washington cake from the 1868 Alice Electa Pickard recipe book from the Szathmary Culinary Collection. I did a little research, and Washington cake, as opposed to George Washington cake or Washington pie, which are different desserts, seems to have become popular in the early 19th century, particularly in the Philadelphia area, where the first capital was. I think you can still get it at bakeries there, especially in the Germantown area of Philadelphia. It seems like these cakes are a variation on fruit cake or a spice cake, kind of also like a little bit like a pound cake. I found some other recipes for Washington cake that call for dried fruit, like currants or raisins, but Alice Electa's doesn't, so I'm not going to be doing that. We'll be using half a pound of butter, a half pound of sugar, a half pound of flour, 3 eggs, a half pint of milk or rich cream, 1/2 glass of wine, which I picked red, didn't say, and a half glass of brandy, as well as nutmeg, cinnamon, and baking soda dissolved in vinegar. So I've let the butter soften ahead of time, and I'm going to cream it together with the sugar as a first step. That looks pretty well combined. Okay, so now that I've taken care of the butter and sugar, the recipe says to add the beaten eggs alternating with the flour. So I'm going to quickly beat my eggs. And I've also got my flour. Since I have way more flour than I do egg, I'm going to start with the flour, I think. And add our milk. So it says milk, if the milk is sour, there is no disadvantage, which makes sense since we're going to be adding another acidic agent, vinegar, with the baking soda as the leavening agent to help it rise. And I imagine that our wine will be kind of acidic as well, so that's what's going to give our cake lift. So we've put in our milk, and now we're going to add the wine. So again, chose red. This is a burgundy we had left over from making French onion soup. And now our brandy. This is actually honey brandy, just it sounded like it might work well. Okay, that looks like, and now final step here is the baking soda and vinegar. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of vinegar. Oh my, it says dissolved in vinegar. Not quite sure about this. Okay, in she goes. So I floured and greased the pan even though it didn't say to, so that will hopefully help it come out more easily when it's done. So the oven part and how to bake this was a little bit tricky to figure out. No information was given with the recipe other than in a brick oven, which I do not have. So I'm just going to use regular oven, and then I had to figure out what temperature to cook it at. So one of the other Washington cake recipes I looked at said use a quick oven. And if you've never seen that before, sometimes oven temperatures were based on how quickly things cooked. So you would see slow, moderate, fast, especially before there was a good way to measure how hot your oven was, even into the invention of the gas stove and oven in the early 20th century. So a quick oven can be as high as 425 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way hotter than your normal cake recipe. If you've ever made even a boxed cake, they don't generally call for it to be that high. So if I set the temperature that high, our loaves would basically end up being a charred outside and probably kind of gooey and gross in the middle. So instead, I'm going to set it to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 40 minutes or so, checking it at about 30 minutes, which is pretty standard for a loaf pan size cake. And I'm also going to use the rack in the middle of the oven, and then once they come out, we'll let them rest for about 10 minutes before we try to get them out, just so that they have time to cool. Here we go, nice and warm. And there we go. So we will be back in about 40 minutes. Here's our other helper. This is Wicket.
See what he thinks of the brandy.
And Wicket doesn't like the smell of alcohol. He's very interested in cooking, but he doesn't like the smell. You can tell he's... No, okay. Okay, you can't. Okay, so it's been closer to an hour. It was not cooking really fast. The top wasn't browning, so I left it in longer. And let's see here. I think I would have probably actually been okay with only one loaf pan. It didn't really rise all that much. I've stacked them on top of one another. I might put like a jam sandwich between them later, or maybe like a layer of chocolate or something to kind of hold it together so you can get an actual cake that you can cut. It also looks and feels pretty spongy, almost more like it's steamed than it baked, but it is cooked all the way through, and the outside is clearly baked. And so now comes the exciting part where we taste test it. So we licked the we licked the spoon and the beaters to taste test earlier, and it tasted okay, and it smelled really good while it was baking. Yeah, it's got that crunchy exterior and it's almost kind of custardy, puddingy inside, but it's definitely cooked. So I don't know how you would make this more cake-like or if it's meant to be like this, but I'd say it's tasty and worth a shot.
So you've been mad by the smell the whole time.
It's more subtle a flavor than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
Though I think the honey was a good choice, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good though. Yeah. No, I like it. I would pick it up from pastry shop.
Yeah, I don't know how we'd make it more cake-like, but thanks for joining us from presidential-themed Snacks from the Stacks. And until then, Wicket says, bye!